It was supposed to be the happiest day of their lives. A wedding draped in elegance, ivory flowers hanging from golden arches, chandeliers dripping with crystals, and the air humming with soft jazz as waiters glided through the crowd with trays of champagne. Guests whispered about the extravagance, about how the wealthy groom's family had spared no expense. But amidst the glittering celebration, an undercurrent of unease would soon ripple through the hall, not because of the vows, not because of the music, but because of what would happen to her. She was radiant, a curvy black woman in a flowing emerald green gown, her natural curls framing her face like a crown. She wasn't the bride, but she might as well have been. Her presence lit up the room. People turned when she walked in, some with admiration, others with envy. She carried herself with the kind of grace that said, "I belong here, no matter what you think." But not everyone agreed. Near the entrance, standing rigid in his crisp uniform, was Officer Mark Hensley, a white cop assigned unofficially to keep an eye on the guest list. He wasn't part of the hired security. He wasn't supposed to be there. But he was close to the groom's family, and when money talks, rules bend. And tonight, Mark had decided he was a judge of who belonged and who didn't. As she crossed the threshold, his eyes narrowed. "Invitation," he barked, even though he hadn't asked the guest before her. She smiled politely, reaching into her clutch. "Of course. Here you go." He didn't take it. Instead, he looked her up and down, his lip curling. "This is a private wedding. You sure you're in the right place?" The words weren't just about her presence. They were about her skin, her body, her identity. The woman's face didn't falter, but inside, her chest tightened. She had faced these looks before. She knew this dance. "I was invited," she replied calmly. "I'm on the list." But Mark wasn't interested in lists. He was interested in power. "Step aside," he ordered. "Let me search your bag." Her brows furrowed. She glanced around. Other guests, white, affluent, dressed in pearls and suits, were breezing past them with no questions, no searches, no humiliation. "Why?" she asked. Her voice was steady, but there was a sharp edge beneath it. "Because I said so." The crowd at the entrance shifted uncomfortably. Some guests stared, some whispered, some pretended not to see. But no one intervened. When she hesitated, Mark's jaw tightened. His voice rose. "Are you resisting? You think you're above the law." And before anyone could process what was happening, his hand was on her arm, gripping hard, yanking her back. The music inside faltered. The murmurs grew louder. And then, the crack of impact. His fist slammed into her side. Gasps filled the room. Underscore, 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 underscore. She stumbled, her emerald gown twisting as she tried to catch herself. Pain shot through her ribs. Her clutch fell to the ground, scattering lipstick, a phone, and the golden-edged invitation that proved she belonged there. But Mark didn't care. He shoved her again, his voice booming. "You don't belong here. You're nothing but trouble." The bride's veil fluttered in the distance. The groom froze mid-step. Guests pressed hands to their mouths. And yet, silence. The silence of complicity. The silence of fear. No one wanted to cross the man in uniform. Her breath shook as she steadied herself, eyes burning, not with tears, but with fury. She straightened her gown, ignoring the ache in her ribs, and looked at him dead in the eye. "You're making a mistake," she whispered. He sneered. "The only mistake is letting people like you through those doors." But then, something shifted. A sharp voice cut through the hall. "Mark." Heads turned. The groom's mother, her pearl necklace glinting under the chandelier, stepped forward. "Enough," she hissed. "Do you have any idea who she is?" Mark scoffed, but a flicker of unease crossed his face. The woman in emerald didn't flinch. She didn't yell. She didn't raise her hand. She simply spoke, calmly, deliberately, and when her name rolled off her tongue, the air changed. It was like the walls themselves shuddered, because her name wasn't just a name. It carried weight, authority, a name that silenced the room, a name that made powerful men sit straighter, that made entire departments tread carefully. And now, every single person in that wedding hall, including the man who had struck her, finally understood the truth. But that truth was only the beginning. Because what no one knew, what no one could predict it, was that this confrontation at a glittering wedding was about to unravel something much darker. A hidden history, a buried secret, and a chain of events that would leave everyone questioning not just who she was, but what power she truly held. Stay with us, because trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. The sound of her name still lingered in the air, like a bell tolling, echoing in every corner of the ballroom. The crowd's murmur turned into silence once again, not because of fear this time, but because of recognition. Mark's hand, the same one that had just struck her, twitched at his side. His smug confidence drained from his face, as if someone had pulled the floor out from beneath him. His lips parted, but no words came. Guests who had been whispering now stared openly. A ripple of realization spread through the room, faces shifting from confusion to shock. They knew that name, some only from headlines, some from hushed conversations at boardrooms or late-night news panels, and some because they had crossed paths with her power before. The woman in emerald green, Amara Johnson, didn't move. She didn't need to. Her presence, her calm, her authority was louder than any scream. "You laid your hands on me," she said softly, but her words carried like a knife's edge. "And you don't even realize the consequences of what you've done." Mark swallowed hard. Sweat prickled at the edge of his temple. For the first time, he felt the eyes of the room not as allies, but as witnesses. The groom's mother stepped forward again, her pearls trembling against her chest. "Mark, you fool," she snapped. "She's the guest of honor tonight. She..." But Amara lifted her hand, silencing even her. "No, let him stew." She turned her gaze back to Mark, her expression unreadable, but her tone cutting. "You thought my skin, my body, my presence disqualified me from belonging here. But let me remind you, my name carries weight far heavier than your badge ever could." The word stung. Mark's jaw tightened. His fist clenched. He wanted to push back, to reassert control, but the way the crowd was looking at him, it had shifted. Their eyes were no longer ignoring her pain. They were no longer complicit. They were watching him, judging him. Then, like a sudden crack in the silence, someone at the back of the room whispered aloud, "That's Attorney General Amara Johnson." The murmur swept the hall like wildfire. Phones were already out recording. Faces lit up with recognition. Gasps followed. Then nods. Then shame. Some of the very same guests who had turned away when she was struck now held their hands over their mouths, realizing they had just watched one of the most powerful women in the country be brutalized in plain sight. And it was too late to undo it. Mark staggered back a step. His arrogance shrank into something uglier. Panic. He stammered. This is a misunderstanding. I thought..." Amar's eyes narrowed. "You thought wrong. You always thought wrong." Her voice, steady and cold, commanded the room in a way no uniform ever could. "You thought your power gave you permission. You thought your skin gave you authority. You thought silence from others meant consent. But tonight, in this room..." She leaned closer. "Your name is the one that will be remembered in disgrace." The guests erupted into whispers again. The bride clutched her veil, her face pale. The groom stood frozen, torn between protecting his family's reputation and the undeniable truth unraveling before him. But before anyone could intervene, a sudden commotion broke out near the back doors. The sound of heavy footsteps. Shouts. 2 more officers rushed into the ballroom, hands on their weapons, scanning the crowd. Mark's head jerked toward them, relief flashing across his face. Reinforcements. But Amara didn't flinch. In fact, she smiled, because she knew something no one else in that room knew yet. The taller officer stepped forward, his gaze locking on to Mark. Officer Hensley. Mark straightened, trying to regain composure. Yes, sir, I was handling. You're done. The words landed like a hammer. Confusion rippled through the guests. Mark's face went pale again. The taller officer reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded document. He unfolded it slowly, deliberately, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. By order of the Attorney General's office, effective immediately, you're under internal investigation. Hand over your badge and firearm. The ballroom gasped. All eyes swiveled back to Amara. She hadn't moved. She hadn't spoken. Yet clearly, this was her doing. Mark froze, humiliation washing over him in waves. You can't do this, he barked, desperation clawing at his voice. This is my jurisdiction. You don't know what you're doing. But the officer holding the document only glared. She knows exactly what she's doing, more than you ever will. Mark's chest rose and fell rapidly. His eyes darted between the officers, the crowd, Amara. He was trapped, but then something shifted in his expression. It wasn't just fear anymore. It was something darker, a secret, one he wasn't willing to let go quietly. His lips curled into a bitter smile as he slowly unpinned his badge, slamming it into the officer's hand. You think this ends here? His voice was low, venomous. You don't even know the half of it. Amara's eyes flickered. Just for a moment, she caught the weight behind his words. The way he said it, the way he smirked, the way his voice carried not just threat, but knowledge. There was something more, something buried, something she had only scratched the surface of. The officers pulled him back toward the doors, but Mark twisted his head one last time, shouting across the ballroom, "Go ahead, Amara, bask in the glory. But when the truth comes out, you won't be the one everyone's cheering for. You'll be the one they're hunting." The room erupted. Guests gasped, some recording, others whispering frantically. Amara stood still, her emerald gown shimmering beneath the chandeliers. Her face betrayed no fear, but inside her heart pounded, because she knew Mark wasn't bluffing. There was more to this story, much more, and whatever secret he carried was tied directly to her name. The ballroom was chaos now, half the guests clamoring to get closer, others rushing out to avoid being caught in a scandal. But Amara stood rooted in place, her mind racing. Mark was gone, but his words lingered. And she knew this was only the beginning. The wedding had been shattered. The silence of her name had stopped the room, but awakened something much darker. What secret did Mark hint at? Why is Amara's name more dangerous than powerful? And how far will the truth reach when it finally comes out? The ballroom still buzzed with shock, a hive of whispers and shifting gazes. But for Amara Johnson, time had slowed. The weight of Mark's final words clawed at her chest. When the truth comes out, you won't be the one they're cheering for. You'll be the one they're hunting. Those words hung heavier than any insult, heavier than the blow he had struck her with, because Amara knew this was not an idle threat. This was a warning, and it terrified her more than she wanted to admit. The 2 officers who escorted Mark out disappeared beyond the gilded double doors, but their departure didn't soothe the room. If anything, it sharpened the tension. Guests clutched their pearls, their champagne glasses, their partners' arms, as though holding on to something solid might stop the ground from shifting beneath them. The bride stood frozen, her veil trembling like a fragile web. The groom whispered urgently to his mother, their words sharp, frantic. but drowned out by the buzz of speculation. Attorney General? Did you see her name tag? She's at Amara Johnson? Phones rose higher into the air, little glowing rectangles recording her every breath, her every movement. Amara remained poised, her emerald gown rippling softly in the ballroom lights. To the room, she radiated control. To herself, she was holding a storm in her chest. She had fought battles in courtrooms. She had stood her ground in policy debates, on stages, at rallies. But tonight was different. This wasn't about laws. This wasn't about politics. This was personal. And Mark's last words suggested her fight was only beginning. From the far end of the ballroom, a man in a tailored navy suit broke through the crowd. His graying hair and deliberate stride marked him as someone used authority. "Ms. Johnson," he said firmly, his voice cutting to the din, "are you all right?" She recognized him instantly. Judge Thomas Reeves. Retired, respected, and more importantly, a man who presided over cases where her name had tilted the scales. "I'm fine," she answered evenly, physically. But Judge Reeves' eyes narrowed. He wasn't asking about bruises. He was asking about the weight of what had just been unleashed. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "That man knows something. Something you haven't told the public." Amara's eyes flicked toward him, but she said nothing, because he was right. The crowd continued buzzing, and in that noise, Amara heard it. Fragments of words, speculation spinning like wildfire. She set him up. "No, he's covering for something. Why would he say that if it wasn't true?" And then, a single phrase that made her skin prickle. "Maybe she's not as innocent as she looks." Amara stiffened. This was exactly what Mark had wanted. He knew the power of planting a single poisonous seed, and already it was sprouting. Enough. The bride's mother, pearls glinting under the chandelier, stepped forward again, her voice trembling with fury. "This is a wedding, not a courtroom, not a press circus." She turned to Amara, her tone hard. "With all due respect, Ms. Johnson, your presence is causing a disruption. Perhaps it's best if you leave." Gasps rippled through the guests. Amara raised her chin, her gaze steady. "I didn't disrupt this night. Your friend did." The older woman flushed, but before she could reply, the groom himself finally found his voice. "Mother, stop," he hissed. But the damage was done. The suggestion hung in the air that Amara was a problem, that her being here was a threat. And some of the guests, wealthy, privileged, insulated, latched onto it, because it was easier to blame her than confront the ugliness of what they had just witnessed. Suddenly, a shrill chime rang out. Phones buzzed in pockets, handbags, and hands. One by one, guests glanced down at their screens and froze. The video was already online. Mark striking Amara, Mark shouting, Mark being dragged away, and Amara standing regal, unflinching, declaring her name. The clip was spreading like fire. On Twitter, on Instagram, on news alerts. The ballroom became a powder keg. Guests whispered furiously. Some stared at Amara with awe, others with suspicion, and a few with thinly veiled resentment. She was no longer just a guest. She was the story, and Mark's warning echoed louder than ever. You won't be the one they're cheering for. Just then, the taller officer who had read the order returned through the ballroom doors. He moved quickly to Amara's side. "We have him secured," he said quietly. But before we moved him, he asked for one phone call. He didn't call his lawyer. He didn't call his captain. Amara's heart skipped. Who did he call? The officer's jaw tightened. He called a senator. Her breath caught. A senator? Why would a disgraced cop under investigation have direct access to a U.S. senator? Unless Mark wasn't bluffing. Unless the secret he hinted at was bigger than her. Bigger than this room. Bigger than one man's badge. As the officer whispered, the guests pressed closer, sensing drama unfolding beyond their comprehension. Someone shouted, "She's hiding something." Another yelled, "Tell us the truth." The crowd was dividing, some defending her, others attacking her, and the luxury ballroom, once a place of celebration, began to feel like a trial. Her trial. She raised her hand. Silence rippled outward like a wave. "I don't owe anyone here an explanation," she began. Her voice was calm but carried steel. "But I will say this. Truth always comes to light, and when it does, you'll understand why tonight happened." Her words weren't a denial. They weren't a confession. They were a promise. And that promise only deepened the mystery. Just then, the faint wail of sirens cut through the night outside. Guests turned toward the tall windows overlooking the city. Red and blue lights flickered against the marble pillars. The FBI had arrived. The ballroom doors burst open. Agents swept inside, their dark suits a stark contrast of sequins and silk of the wedding guests. The lead agent's gaze locked onto Amara. And in that moment, everyone realized this wedding wasn't just a scandal. It was ground zero. As agents fanned to the ballroom, the lead officer approached Amara and whispered words only she could hear. "It's time. We can't keep it buried any longer." Her chest tightened. The secret Mark had hinted at, the truth tied to her name, the reason the FBI was here tonight, was about to come crashing into the light. And when it did, no one in that room, no one in that city, ever look at her the same again. The ballroom was no longer a wedding. It was a crime scene. It was a battleground. And for Amara Johnson, it was the moment the truth began to break open. Mark's warning still echoed in her chest. When the truth comes out, you won't be the one they're cheering for. You'll be the one they're hunting. Now the FBI had arrived. And the question burning in every eye, guest, groom, bride, judge, senator, was the same. What was Amara hiding? The lead agent stepped into the ballroom, his dark suit cutting a sharp line against the glittering gowns. His presence silenced the whispers. His badge glinted under the chandeliers. He stopped directly in front of Amara, lowered his voice so only she could hear. "Agent, it's time. We can't keep it buried any longer." Her heart slammed in her chest. Buried. They knew, and if the Bureau was ready to bring it to light here at a wedding, it meant the secret wasn't just hers anymore. Across the room, the groom's mother whispered furiously into her phone. The bride wiped fresh tears from her cheeks. And near the back doors, quiet but tense, the senator himself had arrived. Tall, silver-haired, a practiced smile that never reached his eyes. Guests parted for him like water, their voices hushed in reverence. Senator Whitmore, the same senator Officer Mark had called from custody, the same man who had supported legislation Amara had fought against for years, the same man whose name had shadowed her career like a storm cloud. Now he was here. He approached slowly, his steps measured, eyes locked on Amara. Whitmore, smoothly. "Amara Johnson, I never thought our paths would cross at a family wedding." Gasps rippled through the guests. Family wedding? The bride's face drained of color. The groom looked like he'd been struck. And then it clicked. Senator Whitmore wasn't just a political name. He was connected to the family hosting the wedding. The bride was his niece. Whitmore extended a hand, but his smile was sharp. "Whitmore, you caused quite the stir tonight. But maybe that's what you wanted. To make a spectacle. To play the victim." Amara didn't move. Didn't flinch. Amara, calm, steady. "The only spectacle here is a decorated officer assaulting me in front of hundreds of witnesses." Whitmore's eyes hardened. Whitmore, and yet somehow you walk away the star. Cameras pointed at you. Your name on every screen. Almost as if you planned this. Gasped again. Seeds of doubt watered by his voice. This was power. This was politics. And this was war. The lead agent cleared his throat, stepping between them. Agent, Senator, with all due respect, this conversation isn't yours to control. We have evidence to review. And Ms. Johnson, he turned to her, we need to speak. Now. Whitmore's smile faltered, just for a moment, because he wasn't used to being cut off, and certainly not in public. Around them, guests whispered furiously. Phones still filmed. The viral clip of Amar's name had already morphed into trending hashtags. But now a second wave of content was spilling out. Hashtag Senator Whitmore. Hashtag the wedding scandal. Hashtag what is she hiding? It was no longer just about Amara versus Mark. It was about power, corruption, and the senator whose reputation hung in the balance. And the guests? They weren't just spectators anymore. They were jurors in a trial unfolding in real time. The agents escorted Amara out of the ballroom and into a smaller chamber off to the side. The heavy oak doors muffled the noise of the wedding. She sat across from the lead agent, pulse racing. Agent, Amara, we've been monitoring Mark for months. His ties to Whitmore, his abuses. But tonight forced our hand. He slid a folder across the table. Inside, photos, documents, surveillance stills. Each one tying Mark not just to the senator, but to a network of officers, lawyers, and political donors. A web of protection. A machine of silence. Amara's stomach turned. This wasn't just one man. It was an entire system. The agent leaned in, voice grave. Agent, and that's why your name matters. Because Whitmore knows something the public doesn't. Amara's breath caught. The words she had dreaded for years. Agent, softly. He knows your father wasn't just a lawyer. He was a man who helped build Whitmore's empire. He was his fixer, his shield, until he turned. The room tilted. Her father, the man she had spent her whole career trying to redeem, to separate from the whispers of corruption. Now the truth was clawing back into the light. Before she could speak, before she could even breathe, there was a sharp knock on the door. An agent opened it. His face was pale. Agent, sir, we just received word. Mark has escaped custody. The room froze. Agent whispering. And he's not alone. He has help. High-level help. Amara's blood ran cold. Because if Mark was free, and if he was backed by the senator's machine, then she wasn't just a target. She was the bullseye. Mark Hensley was supposed to be finished. Dragged out of the ballroom. Locked in federal custody. His career over. But now he was free. And worse, he wasn't alone. Someone powerful had opened the door. Someone who wanted Amara Johnson's silence before the truth about her name could tear open the senator's empire. And as the FBI scrambled, the wedding dissolved into chaos. One thing became terrifyingly clear. The battle wasn't behind her. It was just beginning. The lead agent's voice was grave as he repeated the words. Mark has escaped custody, and he's not alone. Amara's heart pounded. How? She demanded. The younger agent, still pale, answered. The transport van was intercepted. 2 black SUVs. Military precision. Whoever pulled this off knew our route and our codes. Her stomach turned. That meant someone inside the bureau. A leak. A traitor. The lead agent leaned closer. Amara, understand this. Mark isn't running. He's coming back. For you. Back in the ballroom. Senator Whitmore took control of the narrative. His voice rose above the whispers. Ladies and gentlemen, what you saw tonight was chaos brought into our family celebration. But let me be clear. This chaos follows Ms. Johnson wherever she goes. And now it has put us all in danger. Gasps, murmurs, agreement. He was turning the crowd, reframing her as a storm. And with every phone camera streaming live, His words spread beyond the ballroom, across millions of screens. Whitmore smiled inwardly. He knew what Mark's escape meant. A pawn set free, a distraction unleashed. And when the time came, all the blame would point to her. Judge Reeves found Amara in the side chamber, gripping her shoulder. "Don't underestimate him," he whispered. "Mark isn't just a blunt instrument. He's the knife Whitmore uses to carve away threats. And right now, his voice cracked. You're the biggest threat of all." Amara met his eyes. "I'm not afraid of Mark." But Judge Reeves shook his head. "It isn't Mark you should fear. It's what Whitmore will unleash through him. He doesn't just want you silenced. Amara, he wants your name erased." Sirens wailed outside. Helicopters thundered overhead. A nearby screen lit up with breaking news. Breaking. Officer Mark Hensley escapes FBI custody. Linked to wedding brawl involving Attorney General Amar Johnson. The footage replayed again and again, Mark's punch. Amara's defiance. Her name echoing like a strike of lightning. But now the headlines twisted. Amar Johnson at center of FBI collapse. Wedding of the year becomes federal nightmare. Who really is Amar Johnson? The storm Mark had promised was already here. Inside the chamber, the lead agent's phone buzzed violently. He cursed under his breath. Another agent frowned. Orders from upstairs. We're being told to back off Whitmore. What? Amara snapped. You can't be serious. He's the one pulling the strings. The younger agent shifted uncomfortably. Not my call. Direct from D.C. They want us to stand down. Amara realized the truth with icy clarity. This wasn't just Whitmore. This was systemic. This was wrought at the highest levels. The ballroom doors slammed open. And there he was, Mark Hensley, uniform gone, replaced by black tactical gear. His face bruised, but his eyes wild, blazing with purpose. Behind him, men in black, masked, armed. Not police, not FBI, something else. Gasps tore through the crowd. Guests screamed. Phones fell to the floor. Mark's voice thundered across the hall. You think this woman is your savior? She's a lie. Her blood is poison. And tonight, I'll prove it. He raised his weapon, and chaos exploded. Gunfire cracked. Glass shattered. Guests dug beneath tables. Gowns tearing, champagne spilling like blood. Agents rushed forward, but Mark's men were trained ruthless, cutting through the fences with military precision. Amar was pulled by the lead agent toward a side exit. Move. We can't hold them here. Her heart hammered as they sprinted down the marble corridor, footsteps pounding behind them. This wasn't a wedding anymore. This wasn't politics anymore. This was war. As they ran, the lead agent shoved a small drive into her hand. Take it. If we don't make it out, this is everything. Files, names, proof of Whitmore's machine, and your father's role in it. Amara stumbled. My father? The agent's eyes burned. He wasn't just Whitmore's fixer. He was the architect. And when he turned on him, when he tried to dismantle it, Whitmore swore vengeance. That's why you've always been a target, Amara, not for who you are, but for what your name threatens to reveal. Her chest tightened. The truth she had feared her whole life was bigger than she ever imagined. They burst through the service doors into the cold night air, only to find Mark standing there, alone, waiting. He smiled, blood on his lip, eyes locked on hers. Funny thing about secrets, Amara, he sneered. They don't just haunt you. They hunt you. And tonight, he raised his weapon. You're not walking away. The ballroom exploded into chaos. Screams, shattered glass, the thunder of boots and fists. Amara was shoved against a marble pillar, Mark's grip crushing her wrist like a vice. His face twisted, pale with fury, but beneath it all there was fear. Real fear, because the walls weren't just echoing with chaos. They were echoing with his name. Mark Reeves, son of Judge Eleanor Reeves. The words had spread like wildfire. Guests gasped, phones raised, live streams rolling. The name of the cop who brutalized a black woman wasn't just a thug in uniform. It was a child of one of the most powerful judges in the state. And Mark knew that name carried weight. Too much weight. Security tried to rush forward, but Mark pulled his gun. The ballroom froze. "Stay back," he barked, veins bulging in his neck. His voice cracked, desperation seeping through the rage. "Nobody move or she dies." His pistol pressed harder into Amara's temple. The room trembled in silence. But Amara, she didn't tremble. Her eyes locked on him, defiant, burning through the fear. Her voice came low, steady for him alone. "You're not scared of me," she whispered. "You're scared of the truth." The words sliced through him. For just a second, his grip faltered. That's when the first glass bottle flew. Then a chair. Then an avalanche of chaos. The guests, the same wealthy elites who once whispered prejudice in corners, were suddenly emboldened. The room turned against him. Mark fired once into the chandelier. Crystal exploded in a rain of fire and sparks. The crowd scattered. And in that chaos, Amara shoved her elbow into his ribs, spun free, and ran. The chase began. She tore through the gilded hallways of the hotel. Gown ripped, heels abandoned, lungs on fire. Behind her, Mark's boots hammered against marble. Each echo grew louder. Somewhere in the distance, sirens wailed. Police? Or his backup? She didn't know. She didn't have time to care. She rounded a corner, slammed into a waiter, trays clattering. Mark was right behind. His hand brushed her dress. She bolted down the stairwell 2 steps at a time. The hotel blurred around her. Velvet carpets, golden walls, chandeliers overhead. Beauty turned into a battlefield. And Mark wasn't chasing her like a man trying to silence his victim. He was chasing her like a man who had everything to lose. They burst into the underground garage. The air changed, oil, gasoline, shadows flickering under fluorescent lights. Cars lined in rows, engines idling, doors open, waiting. And that's when she saw them, men in tactical black, guns, earpieces, not hotel security, Mark's reinforcements. The conspiracy was here, real, armed, and waiting. "Get her!" Mark roared. They opened fire. Bullets screamed against steel. Concrete chipped into dust. Amara dug behind a black SUV, heart slamming like a drum. Her hands shook as she crawled low, glass crunching under her palms. But then, another gunshot. Not aimed at her, aimed at them. Judge Eleanor Reeves. Her heels clicked against the concrete, her pistol raised, her robe abandoned for a bulletproof vest. "Stand down," she screamed. "This ends now." For a second, even Mark froze. The woman who had built his shield of power, his mother, was here, gun in hand. Her eyes locked on her son. Her lips trembled, but her aim never wavered. Mark put it down. But Mark only laughed. A hollow, broken laugh. "You don't get it, do you?" he spat, voice echoing off the concrete. "You think this is about me? No, Mom. This is bigger than all of us." He motioned to the men in black. "They don't answer to you anymore." The tactical squad didn't lower their weapons. Not for the judge. Not for anyone. For the first time in her career, Judge Reeves looked powerless. And Amara understood. The corruption ran deeper than family. This wasn't about a racist cop anymore. This was about a system. An empire protecting itself. Gunfire ripped again. Sparks exploded across the garage. Amara and the judge dug behind cover. Side by side, breathing hard. "You came here to save me?" Amara whispered, shocked. Judge Reeves didn't look at her. Her eyes stayed locked on Mark. "I came here to stop him." The firefight turned brutal. Bullets ricocheted. Tires burst. Alarms blared. Mark charged through it like a soldier gone rogue, grabbing one of the tactical rifles. His mother shouted after him, "Don't make me do this, Mark." But he only sneered back. "You already did." Then came the blast. A grenade rolled under cars. The explosion lit the garage in fire and steel. Concrete split. Cars flipped. Flames swallowed the air. Amara was thrown against a wall, her ears ringing, blood in her mouth. Through the smoke, she saw Mark dragging the judge, his own mother, by the arm, dragging her toward the exit. "Mom," he growled, gun pressed into her ribs, "you're going to help me walk out of here, or we both burn." Amara tried to rise, but her legs buckled, her chest heaved. She reached for anything, a weapon, a shard of glass, anything. And then she felt it. Her phone, still in her gown pocket. The live stream, still rolling. The whole world was watching. She raised it with shaking hands. Framed the shot. Mark, the judge, the gun, the fire, every secret, every lie, every scream. All of it live. Mark turned, saw the red recording light, and froze. For the first time, his mask cracked. Not rage, not arrogance. Fear. His eyes darted between Amara and the camera, between his mother and the millions watching. He raised the gun to Amara's head. The judge screamed. The live stream caught it all. And then, darkness. The power cut. The stream died. The garage plunged into shadows. Somewhere in the black, Mark's voice slithered through the smoke. "You really think truth saves you?" he whispered. "You don't even know what's coming." The click of a gun chamber. The brush of steel against her temple. The ballroom had fallen into a silence, so sharp it could cut glass. Senator Harold Whitman's polished mask had shattered. Mark, the cop who brutalized Amara, stood frozen, pale, jaw tight, knowing every lie he'd spun was unraveling before hundreds of witnesses. And in the center of it all, Amara, once bruised, humiliated, and silenced, now stood tall. Her voice, her very presence, had bent the entire room toward truth. But this was no ending. This was only the beginning of the reckoning. At first, it was just murmurs, guests whispering, phones pulled discreetly to record. But then, the truth spread like fire. "Wait, she's the one that cop beat up?" Someone gasped. "That's her? That's Amara? And she's related to who?" Eyes darted, voices rose. Even the orchestra fell silent, violins dangling midair. Mark's hand twitched near his belt, a reflex of a man used to intimidation. But control was gone. The eyes of the room were no longer his to command. And Amara knew it. Her gaze never wavered. "You thought you could bury me," she said, her voice steady, though her hands trembled at her sides. "But you didn't just pick the wrong woman. You picked the wrong name." Senator Whitman stepped forward, face blotched with red. "Enough of this circus," he barked. His voice, once the voice of authority, now quivered under the weight of exposure. But the crowd didn't obey. They leaned in closer, hungry, waiting. "Tell them, Senator." Amara pressed, her voice cut like a blade. "Tell them about the hush money, about the calls you made to the precinct, about the way you shielded dirty cops while your pockets grew heavy with blood money." Whitman stuttered, his jaw working but words failing. Sweat dripped down his temple. And then, from the back, a voice rang out. "We have the tapes." Every head snapped. Detective Harris strode in, flanked by 2 federal agents, a briefcase in hand. Whitman's eyes widened in terror. No, you can't. But Harris only smirked. Oh, but we can. And tonight, the world will hear every word. Mark lunged. Desperation twisted his face. He grabbed Amara's arm, gripping hard enough to bruise. You don't get to destroy me, he hissed through clenched teeth. You don't know who I am. You don't know what I've done for the city. Amara didn't flinch. For the first time, she looked into his eyes, not with fear, but with clarity. I know exactly who you are, she whispered, and so will everyone else. The agents moved in, tearing Mark's grip from her arm. He struggled, spit flying, screaming curses and denials. But the crowd saw. They saw the cruelty that had been hidden under his badge. They saw the truth. As Mark was dragged back, Harris opened the briefcase and laid out file after file. Photos, bank records, audio recordings, the senator's corruption, Mark's violent cover-ups, the precinct's pattern of targeting vulnerable black women. Each revelation landed like a thunderclap. The room wasn't just shocked, it was enraged. A woman in the crowd sobbed openly. Another shouted, "We believed in you, Senator. We voted for you." Whitman staggered, cornered by the truth he could no longer spin. And then Amara did what no one expected. She stepped forward, not to gloat, not to rage, but to speak. Her voice carried over the ballroom, steady, resolute. This isn't just about me. It never was. This is about every woman who has been silenced. Every black woman who's been called a liar or crazy or disposable. Every victim buried under corruption and power. Tears glistened in her eyes, but her chin remained high. They tried to erase me, but tonight we erased them. The crowd erupted. Applause thundered, echoing against the chandeliers. The agents moved swiftly. Mark in handcuffs. Whitman restrained. His rights read out loud as his face drained of all color. The once celebrated senator dragged before flashing cameras. The once feared cop, shackled, no longer a predator but prey. For the first time, Amara could breathe. The weight she had carried alone was now lifted into the open. Weeks later, the trial began. And if the wedding had been the explosion, the courtroom was the earthquake that followed. Testimonies poured in. Victims who had been too afraid to speak came forward, emboldened by Amara's courage. Each story painted the same picture. Brutality hidden under a badge, corruption shielded by power, silence enforced through fear. And through it all, Amara sat in the front row. Her presence a reminder, her name a warning. Truth cannot be silenced. When the verdicts came, guilty, 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 the courthouse shook with cheers. Mark, convicted on multiple counts of assault and civil rights violations. Whitman, stripped of his title, sentenced for corruption, bribery, and conspiracy. Justice finally had a name. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Microphones thrust forward. Flashes exploding. Amara, how do you feel? One shouted. What's next for you? Amara paused, the cool spring breeze brushing against her skin. I feel free, she said simply, and I feel seen. Her words rippled through the crowd, because in that moment, Amara wasn't just speaking for herself. She was speaking for countless others who had never been given the chance. Months later, Amara stood at the edge of the ocean, waves lapping at her feet. She thought of the girl she had been that night at the wedding, frightened, broken, humiliated, and she thought of the woman she was now, a survivor, a voice, a name that could no longer be silenced. The sun dipped low, painting the sky in fierce oranges and reds, and in that fire-lit horizon, Amara saw her future. Not one chained to fear, but one blazing with possibility. But even as she stood in victory, one thought lingered like a shadow. If Mark and Whitman had operated so boldly, who else was still out there? Who else was hiding behind polished smiles and powerful titles? Amara closed her eyes, letting the salt air fill her lungs. Her story was finished, but the fight for justice? That was only just beginning. Stories like this remind us of something powerful. That silence protects the guilty, but truth protects the innocent. Amara's journey shows us that no matter how dark the lies, how powerful the villains, or how painful the struggle, justice can still prevail when we refuse to give up. And maybe you see a little of yourself in her story. Moments where the world doubted you, moments where you felt cornered, moments where you had to rise stronger than anyone expected. If this story moved you, let your voice be heard. Drop a comment below. Tell us what part hit you the hardest. Don't forget to like this video if you believe in truth standing taller than corruption. Share it with a friend who needs encouragement today. And most importantly, subscribe so you never miss the stories that remind us courage and justice always find a way. Because together, we're not just watching stories. We're building a community of voices that will never be silenced.